I'm your host, Roger Stone. You're here on the Genesis Communications Network. We're broadcasting from the Stone Zone, and I hope you're ready for some of the stone cold truth. With me is my co-host, Tyler Nixon. And we have a terrific show. We have joining us will be Alex Pfeiffer from the Daily Caller, WBAI's Randy Credico, who does a lively progressive radio show there. Trey Smith, the filmmaker who has explored biblical prophecy and a number of other interesting astral subjects. But the focus this whole week, I think everybody recognizes, will be on the upcoming testimony of former FBI Director James Comey. And liberals, of course, are convinced that Comey will produce a memorandum in which he writes that the President of the United States sought to impede his investigation into General Flynn, even though the acting Attorney General tells us that the government has no such proof. But it seems to me that first Mr. Comey must get by a much larger problem. In fact, the former FBI director thought he saw proof of obstruction of justice in the Hillary Clinton email case, but rather than report it as an officer of the court, he furthered the obstruction. Now, this is not some crazy conspiracy theory. The source of the shocking expose is the Washington Post. They documented that Comey decided to give Hillary a pass only after seeing and believing in the authenticity of a document that claimed that Obama's Attorney General Loretta Lynch had assured a Clinton campaign associate that DOJ would not vigorously pursue the entire Hillary case regarding her illegal server and the use of an unsecure server for classified documents. That document constitutes obstruction. It's now been discredited by the FBI as a forgery, yet Director Comey embraced it even over disagreement about its provenance from his experts. In other words, why didn't Mr. Comey report this inappropriate fix? Instead, he moved to facilitate it and did. So I don't know what shred of credibility he has left. This is the same guy who was deputy director of the Senate Whitewater Committee. Jim and Susan McDougal and Governor Jim Guy Tucker all went to jail in that scandal. Jim McDougal, a close pal and running buddy of the Clintons, a financier of Clinton's early campaign, died in jail when he was denied medicine he needed to live. No one really made any money in Whitewater, but here's what you need to know. Bill Clinton pulled $850,000 to finance the closing TV blitz that allowed him to get back in the governor's mansion after, in a freak election, he was defeated for re-election 2 years previous, thanks largely to his extraordinarily arrogant attitude in his first term. And therefore, charges should have been brought against the president, but they were not. Now we have the question of Mr. Comey's prosecution of Mark Rich, the international fugitive from justice. Mr. Comey was the original prosecutor in the case that put Rich away, and then he was appointed to examine whether payments that Rich had given to the Clinton Foundation bought him a pardon, which there's certainly evidence that it did. No case brought against Mr. Clinton. Then there was a Sandy Berger case. Berger was Clinton's national security advisor. He went into the National Archives, snagged papers that showed that Bill Clinton could have killed Osama bin Laden, but did not. stuffed them down the front of his pants, got caught. Of course, no charges were brought against Mr. Berger under the investigation of Mr. Comey. Comey went on to work for Lockheed Martin. They paid him $6 million. They are, as it turns out, the most corrupt company in the world. The list of corrupt actions that they were caught and fined for during his tenure there is extraordinary. And then, of course, there's the HSBC question, where the congressman, the Mr. Comey allowed HSBC, which had laundered hundreds of millions of dollars worth of drug money. So this is a criminal enterprise, far more than a financial crime. He allows them to escape paying a fee. No one goes to jail. And then Mr. Comey subsequently joins the board of HSBC. How much was he paid in board fees? So I think when the president made this decision, he made the right decision. And the question is whether someone on the committee, the Republicans, Marco Rubio and Tom Cotton being the most likely, both of whom have a cojones, confront Mr. Comey with the stunning proof of his politicization of the agency, his lack of judgment, just the fact that he let Hillary off the hook on the basis of a fake email. You're forced to question the man's judgment level. For those who haven't had an opportunity to sign up, I also want to mention ChargeHillaryClinton.com, ChargeHillaryClinton.com. We are very impressed with the number of petition signatures we're picking up there. It seems to me that more and more people realize that the president has to turn the tables on his deep state tormentors. He needs to get the attorney general to begin looking at the actions of Admiral Rogers and Raymond Clapper, John Brennan, the former CIA director, Susan Rice, perhaps even Valerie Jarrett. It is impossible for the president to survive on defense. Stone's rules: attack, attack, attack.
Do you think, and I'm just good to be with you, Roger, I'm sorry there was a technical issue, but do you think Jeff Sessions is up to the task? Do you think he's going to be able to handle it?
Well, I wish he would spend more time worrying about national security than trying to lock people up for using marijuana in states where it's been legalized. I mean, in all honesty, he was an able attorney general. He tried some very important civil rights cases. I understand that he may have prematurely recused himself in the Russian matter, but this is not the Russian matter. The issue here is the illegal use of surveillance data for political purposes, Watergate, and worse. And Ms. Rice most certainly has been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She refuses to testify. That was a one-day story. When General Flynn refused to testify or refused to turn over documents, oh my God, you would think that the sky was falling. The media double standard is just, it's hard to swallow. It just is.
It's beyond belief that they even give Hillary Clinton a minute of airtime to whine and complain about how it's everyone's fault but hers. This woman is a complete psychopath, and there's just no two ways about it, Roger.
Well, it's interesting the way she goes to Wellesley and she says Richard Nixon was impeached. Well, he wasn't impeached. Unlike her husband, he had the good sense to resign when he realized that his tenure was hurting the country. Bill Clinton was also impeached. Neither one of them was convicted. The important thing, of course, is that Hillary would like to rewrite history. She was fired from the House Watergate Impeachment Committee. She was canned by Jerry Ziefman. He was the chief of staff and general counsel. No, he did have the authority to fire her. She was fired. If you go out on the net, you see an alternative history has been written by the Hillary goons. Welcome back to the Stone Cold Truth, and we'll be back with more shortly.
Hi, this is Bernie Sanders, and believe me, I know you may not believe me, but you gotta believe me. In my opinion, I like the Stone Cold Truth. and I listen to it.
Welcome back. You are at the Stone Cold Truth here on the Genesis Communications Network. And joining us now is the Daily Caller's Alex Pfeiffer. Alex,
hey, Roger, thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you here in the Stone Zone. You cover politics for the Daily Caller, and I know that you were hired and considered by many to be a protege of Tucker Carlson, who is, of course, a great friend of this show. And I am extraordinarily pleased at his success at Fox, where he is, in my view, one of the few bright points in the lineup. And the irony, of course, is that he has worked with Fox for so very long. And I always thought his talents were being wasted on the morning, Fox and Friends on the weekends. And now he is where his kind of libertarian instincts and his feistiness can really show.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing, stupid little gags for, Bass Pro Shops at 7 in the morning in his old gig. And, now we really see someone who used to be a prolific magazine writer being able to debate politicians and, talk on issues. That's what he's best at. I guess he just had to, work in the trenches there until they got him here. I mean, he had all these great battlefield promotions going from 7 to 9 to 8. So it's worked out pretty well for him.
No, I think it's extraordinary. I watched him with a member of the D.C. City Council who was trying to say that armed robbery was a legitimate form of political dissent. And Tucker destroyed this guy, just destroyed him. He's had some really excellent segments lately. I, of course, as you know, I still lament the long missing bow tie.
I got to say, Tucker's first 20 minutes last night were worth recording as just a running indictment of everything that's gone on with the Democrats and the liberals in the past, say, 2 years. He's just on fire these days. I mean, I don't know who writes for, who prepares a show, but it was outstanding.
Well, it's a family affair. Not family affair, I guess. It's Daily Caller affair. He brought in Blake Neff, used to cover campuses for the Daily Caller, so that's as his chief writer, so I think that's why there's the big focus on schools there.
Sure.
And you folks also broke the TI scandal on Capitol Hill involving the Awan family, no?
Yeah, this is something Luke Roszak has been following. It's ridiculous that it's not getting that much mainstream coverage. These Awan brothers, one of them was working at McDonald's. Like that was his day job, and he was employed by several Democratic congressmen as an IT guy, and they fled to Pakistan. And why are these guys? Why did these congressmen pay the Awan brothers? It's a safe assumption that they must have had some dirt on them.
Well, they were paid $4 million for services that were described as mundane. And when the Capitol Police basically shut the operation down and barred them from the system, Deborah Wasserman Schultz changed the position of one of the brothers from IT technician to consultant so that he could continue to have access. When the Capitol Police seized his laptop, she demanded that she get it back, and she threatened the Capitol Hill police chief, who's a solid, serious law enforcement veteran of 31 years. What is it that's on that laptop? What is it we need to see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is an actual, hacking scandal where it isn't just a very vague PDF from the DNI. I mean, I think there's a lot more meat to the story than all, the whole Russian investigation. And it is ridiculous. We're not.
It's countenancing corruption, too. It's just corruption. And I mean, that's really what it's all about. These people should never have been near any type of government computer.
But what you don't know, Tyler, is she protecting them because it's politically correct to do so, or is she protecting them because they're blackmailing her and a half dozen other members with God knows what?
There's no way that they would go out of their way, as she has, to to really keep this person in the fold. I mean, considering all the complaints within the House, staffers and so forth, that it's clearly they have dirt on them, and they were involved in an extortion of their own, what was it, mother-in-law, I guess, or something, their own mother. They were extorting her, monitoring her every move technologically, and trying to extract some sort of money out of her. So extortion is their game. I guarantee you they're extorting Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others, and there's nothing they can do about it.
So also, Alex, you had a big story this week, which really shook Miami, I can tell you, and that is that President Trump is going to reverse some of the less restrictive rules regarding Cuba, and that maybe the Cold War may be taking on a little freeze here.
Yeah, so I broke this on Monday. President Trump's going to roll back some of the loosened restrictions that Obama enacted. He's going to make it tougher to travel there, tougher to do business there. He is likely to keep diplomatic relations, however, but this would be something that hardliners Marco Rubio and Diaz-Balart are in support of. And I am told that this is because Rubio horse-traded his support for Tillerson to get these concessions from Trump. And Diaz-Balart did the same with his vote on the Obamacare repeal bill. And Trump is, as I'm told, that he's going to announce this in June in Miami at the Lincoln Day dinner that Kellyanne Conway's speaking at. I was told that he's going to be her special guest there and announce this rollback. And he's been on different sides of this issue. In 2015, he said, it's been 50 years, it's fine. We can deal with them. But while on the campaign trail last year, he called Obama's actions, I think, disastrous was the term. This would be filling a campaign promise, I guess, of sorts.
Well, if you go back and look at the Miami Herald in, I think it was 2000, there's a long piece by Donald Trump about the embargo, and he understood that the problem with the argument of those who say you could open Cuba up by doing commerce there is they don't understand that under Cuban law, all companies are owned by the government. There is no privately owned company. And therefore, you're not doing business with individual Cubans, nor are you doing business with other foreign nationals. You're basically doing business with the government. You pay them dollars, they pay the people pesos, and they're using the money to reinforce the police state. So what they've done here is very clever. They won't let you do business with a company that the government owns, which is every company in Cuba. Look, I laud what Rubio and Diaz-Balart have done here. We gave so much, but I can't see what we got from these thugs. I see what we gave, but are they going to stop oppressing gays, Jews, Christians, dissidents, people who want to vote for more than one party? The secret police are still quite active. Raul Castro may be more vicious than his brother. All right. Thank you very much, Alex Pfeiffer, breaking big news on Miami and Cuba. And we'll be back with the Stone Cold Truth in just a few moments on the Genesis Communications Network.
This is Bill Clinton, and you're about to enter the world of the Stone Cold Truth.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, here with the most able Tyler Nixon. Tyler, we have one of your relatives in the House joining us now, the 37th President of the United States, calling in, I notice, from Saddle River, New Jersey. Mr. President, welcome to the Stone Cold Truth.
Well, let me make this perfectly clear. This is not my first time on Stone Cold Truth, but it's been a long time, Roger. I've been waiting for your call, and I'd like to know what took you so long.
Well, I've been following you on Twitter, where you're on as Richard Nixon 103. and I notice that you follow my Twitter feed very closely.
It's very entertaining, Roger. Very entertaining. I like the way you give it to Adam Schiff and all these other phony liberals, California.
So, Mr. President, you must be feeling a certain sense of deja vu here. I mean, you've got Donald Trump under siege by the same forces that ended your presidency. As we now know in history, with some perspective, you ended the war in Vietnam faster than the Pentagon wanted. You reached around the national security apparatus to begin bringing the Chinese to the table and normalized relations with them. And, of course, you reached strategic arms limitation agreement with the Russians. Good God, man, you were a peacemaker. And that's why, of course, they had to take you out, sir.
Well, Russia, we got to say Russia, we should definitely not have bellicose relationships with. Russia's nuclear armed, ICBMs, this is not North Korea. There's no sense saber-rattling so a few people in the military-industrial complex can pocket billions of dollars. It risks hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives to saber-rattle just to please the military, the Pentagon, and all these other entities profiting on war. I learned my lesson on this.
Well, sir, it appears to me that Donald Trump, much like you, favors détente. I mean, what advice would you give him sitting down with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I would say sit down. Let's end this thing in Syria. Let's go after ISIS, not after the government of Syria. That doesn't make sense. That's what the Saudis want. That's only trouble. If you want to make real friends with the Russians, go after ISIS. After all, I have a little cold here. Hillary created ISIS. Why are we still supporting them by supporting the Saudis?
Well, Mr. President, I know that you have been under the weather, and I appreciate you giving us this exclusive interview. I saw yesterday, believe it or not, John Dean on television talking about...
Don't mention his name.
What he's saying, what's going on now in the Trump White House is much worse than what happened under Richard Nixon. So I guess my question for you, Mr. President, is if you had to give the president some advice regarding this media onslaught against him, what would your advice be?
Well, the first thing I would do is, please, don't bring in the bad luck charm, the dark cloud, Henry Kissinger. I made that mistake. Now I see him in a photo with Kissinger. That would be the first thing I would do, is ice Kissinger out of the White House. No more photos with him. As you know, he was not very good when it came to my administration in times of trouble. He was a real summer soldier. So I would get rid of Kissinger. What I would do is, John Dean, the turncoat. John Dean is a sellout. He destroyed my administration. What he could have done is come to me. And then you got Woodward and Bernstein, both CIA stooges, out there, Office of Naval Intelligence, working with an FBI agent. Now, as if this guy is a great guy, the FBI agent working with Hoover. So there's a lot of blame to be going around everywhere. Let's not make these guys heroes.
I see your point. I mean, in the case of John Dean, we now know, of course, that he is the one who planned, pushed, covered up the Watergate break-in, that two decorated New York police officers who worked for him as investigators, Jack Caulfield and Tony Ulasewicz, say in both their memoirs and their oral histories now at Texas A&M that John Dean sent them to the Watergate to case the place out 6 weeks before the break-in. We know that Dean lied to you, sir, for 9 months straight, and that in his definitive book on Watergate that he says publishes all the known transcripts, he omitted the transcripts of March 13th, 17th, 19th, and 21st because they show him coaching you on how to commit perjury. So enough of
Roger,
Mr. Dean.
Let me just say this, Roger. Let me interrupt. That's the reason why you were a young man at the time, I think just barely in your 20s, I should have brought you up. With that kind of photographic memory, for detail, you would have been the guy that should have been in that spot instead of a weasel like John D.
So what is your view of the Trump White House staff? You've worked with how many White House staffs? I mean, 8 years under Eisenhower, your own administration. How do you assess Trump's White House staff?
I would say I've never seen so many leaks in all my life. This is my plumber squad. I'd have to expand it tenfold. Try to plug the leaks that are coming out of the White House. Obviously, there's somebody there that's been gotten to. You got fifth columnists left to right. Spicer's no good. Kellyanne Conway, who knows? She worked with Cruz, I believe. There's nobody to be trusted there. Maybe Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis. You got to be careful with all these people there. Everyone's looking out for themselves. There's no idealism. It's all about self-control or self-preservation, Roger. You know that. And that's what's going on now. He has a lot of betrayers around him. This reminds me of the Pazzi conspiracy in Florence in 1492.
Tyler, do you have any questions for our former president?
Am I in the will?
Certainly, but it's been sealed for 50 years.
Oh, jeez.
Sometime in 2042, take a look. I think Roger's in there. I gave him my box full of Nixon tattoos. They're in a big box. You can have them. Different stamps everywhere on the body. Beautiful. And for you, Tyler, let me just say this. Keep your enemies close and kill your friends.
So,
did you?
Tyler,
I want to. What was it like having to stand still for that long to pose for the tattoo artist who put the tattoo on Roger's back? That's what I want to know.
Well, that was amazing. I had to stand there. Reminded me of Lust for Life with Kirk Douglas. You've seen that movie. It's a wonderful movie. Anthony Quinn standing there, posing for that great tattoo artist. I just stood there, had my scotch and soda. Roger was smoking a cigar, and it was like old times.
So, Mr. President,
make sure he didn't put Kissinger or Alexander Haig on the other side of his body.
That's
one,
for sure.
One for each nipple.
So I guess my other question would be, Mr. President, I know you're a man who's objective about your own both triumphs, but also your occasional defeats. If you look back at it now, which would you say was the larger mistake, taking America off the gold standard or waging the so-called war on drugs?
Well, it's the latter, Roger. That was a big mistake. Unfortunately, people haven't learned the lesson. I learned a lesson. I got a lot of bad advice. I did that. A lot of people in prison, bankrupted a lot of these local economies. A lot of money went into it, building prisons and all of that. It was a bad move. But now you got a guy like Sessions. I don't know where you found Sessions. He sounds a lot like George Wallace to me. And he is continuing and keeping the bad legacy of the Nixon legacy alive. I wish Mr. Sessions grow up, smoke a joint, have a drink, have a good time, get out of those southern courthouse steps with all these other people that want to put people like me in jail for smoking a joint. I wish I had smoked a joint back then.
All right, Mr. President, now that's a heck of an admission from Richard Milhouse Nixon here on The Stone Cold Truth, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is former President Jimmy Carter. Rosalind and I like The Stone Cold Truth because, like me, Roger Stone always tells the truth.
Welcome back. You're in the Stone Zone here at Stone Cold Truth, and it's amazing. The phones are ringing off the hooks. Once former President Nixon was heard on the show, I guess that really lit our phone lines up. Let's go to line one. We have former President Ronald Reagan called in. President Reagan, welcome to the Stone Cold Truth.
Well, Roger, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. I think this is my third time, but, you know, I don't get residuals. I've been waiting for my residual check. But you know what? I'm doing this for the giver, Roger Stone, because you were always there for me, did a great job in back then in '84, I believe, helping us win re-election when, we thought we might get a scare from Walter Mondale.
Well, I thank you very much for calling in. Now it seems that the Reverend Jesse Jackson's on another line, and he wants equal time for the Democrats. Welcome to the Stone Zone and Stone Cold Truth, Reverend Jackson.
Nice to be on the show, Roger. I have been on the show before. I understand that you are upset with some of the behavior of Mr. Jeff Sessions, and I feel exactly the same way. We cannot incarcerate ourselves out of the opioid problem. And I don't think it's in... Hello?
Reverend, I'm going to have to put you on hold because we've got a call here.
I have one quick question for the Reverend, though.
Go.
Is it true that when you called New York Hymietown, what did you mean by that?
What I meant was...
and you don't have to answer.
Salami town. A lot of salami in the town. And that's what I was talking about. It came out salami instead of salami.
I see. Well, Reverend, I'm going to have to put you on hold because evidently they're telling me we have an emergency call from former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. So thanks, Rev. Hold on a second. Mayor Giuliani, you're on the line at the Stone Cold Truth.
Always a thrill to be on the show, Roger. A fantastic job. Can you do me a favor? I know you're close to Trump. Ask him if I can get a job with him. I worked very hard, took a lot of heat. It's very important. I got to get away from this Judith Miller person. Judith, whatever last name is, Judith Giuliani. But first of all, I want to say Jeff Sessions, too liberal, give people the death penalty for smoking pot. He wants to just put them in jail for a lifetime. I think it's a mistake. I think we should. The death penalty, first of all, doesn't go far enough.
Now we've definitely got a problem because the Reverend Al Sharpton insists that he be heard in this debate. Mayor, I'm going to put you on hold. Reverend Sharpton, you just heard your nemesis, Rudy Giuliani. What do you have to say?
I want to say that I've said this before, that Rudy Giuliani, no justice, no peace. I think he has been a black mark in our city for a long time. And what I want from him, and the only reason I would say anything good about him, if he could raise $50, $100 bills. I need $50, $100 bills. The National Action Network has a lot of bills to pay. I need some hard cash. And if Rudy wants me to say something nice, he ought to come through, dip into that huge bank account of his, and take care of the Reverend.
All right, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the talents of Randy Credico.
Hey, well done.
Welcome, Randy. Let me just get a little bit of a real talk here. I'm sure you were disturbed as I was when it was reported that the Trump administration was considering bringing charges against Julian Assange. And I know he's been on your program a number of times. From my point of view, he's a journalist. He's broken no laws. You could argue that he's published things that were stolen, but maybe those folks haven't heard of the Pentagon Papers and what the courts held in that case. He has done the American people a service, in my opinion, by exposing corruption, which is the only reason they want to shut him up.
That's right. Exactly right. He is a publisher. He's done nothing different than the Washington Post, with their leaks, and the New York Times with their leaks, going back to Daniel Ellsberg, him coming out. You can't go after, well, they just let Chelsea Manning out, right, after 5 years, right? Chelsea Manning was the one that purportedly gave WikiLeaks the information, the war logs. He just published it. So if they're giving him clemency, why don't they give Mr. Assange clemency? He is a publisher. They had him in jail, basically inside that, surrounded by the Brits. The UN has said that he is illegally being obtained based on this bogus Swedish, not even a charge. Well, they dropped the charges now.
That was 6 years. That was so phony to begin with. These were trumped-up charges, typical British intelligence BS. He didn't sexually assault anybody. No. He's a truth teller. He is a freedom fighter. He's not Republican or Democrat. I don't think he's liberal or conservative. He's only committed to the truth. That's all he's committed to.
He's a publisher without a party. He really is. In fact, he ran for office in Australia on the Assange party, the WikiLeaks party. He doesn't support this candidate or that candidate. He just gets out there. He tells the truth. You know, there was nothing. When they said, well, you know, people, to me, they said, you know, you got Assange on, he cost Hillary the election. That's garbage. Hillary cost herself the election. Podesta cost Hillary the election. Brazil cost Hillary the election, not Julian Assange. Because there was a bunch of information out there about Trump, and the public didn't care. You know, whatever this thing with that guy Bush in California and everything, they didn't care. There was nothing he could release that was going to defeat Donald Trump, if he had anything. Hillary was the worst candidate with a very sordid background, greedy, and people saw it, and she didn't go to Wisconsin or Michigan.
No, well, I think you're exactly right about the fact that she was a poor candidate. But this is all an effort to distract from the content of the emails. The entire attack on Assange and WikiLeaks is an obvious attempt to distract from the content and quality of what they produce. Nothing they've ever produced has been challenged as inauthentic or counterfeit or phony. They've never retracted anything. Can the New York Times say that?
No, the only publisher that I know, I mean, there are other online leak vehicles, but and they have retracted occasionally, but not WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks got a 100% accuracy rate, never been confuted by anybody, by any publication. And the biggest problem here is that the Washington Post and the CNN, they should all be supporting WikiLeaks, because if they go after WikiLeaks, they're going after themselves, because they'll be next. This doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I think that Julian Assange, first of all, I think he's a hero, number one. Number two, I think he's a human litmus test in many ways, because how people view Julian Assange and WikiLeaks very much tells you, in a simple question, what that person's true intentions, what their true ethos are, their true politics. If they view him as some sort of, you know, traitor and all this garbage they come up with, or whatever have you, a criminal, versus being a whistleblower, a hero, an exposer of corruption, you know, that really tells you what you need to know about someone's politics.
You know who interfered? We have conclusive proof who interfered in last year's election, and that was the DNC. Russia had nothing to do with it. Complete trash. Everybody knows that. It was the DNC. They did it. They're the ones that sabotaged Bernie Sanders. If they had not sabotaged it, they're the ones that should be there in a congressional committee right now facing the fire for interfering with that democratic process. Bernie Sanders would have won that primary, he would have won the nomination, and then he probably would have beaten Trump. So no one can complain about WikiLeaks. They got to complain about Hillary. Hillary destroyed it for the Democrats. She and her minions, who were all in it for the dough. They have no idealism whatsoever. That's where the fingers should be going, and they should be facing the congressional committee. Is the Democratic National Committee? They're the ones responsible. They interfered in our democracy, not Russia. It was the DNC.
Absolutely. You know, I think that just the Hillary Clinton, I mean, all these folks who object to this, it's the same media people who would say Assange is a criminal, who would, you know, pass along these trumped-up charges against him that have kept him locked away. That must be a horrible life. I mean, the man is clearly suffering. I mean, it's not...
yes.
You know,
he's got his kids. He's got kids. His mother out there. He's been in jail, basically, on phony allegations, not even charges. He finally had to dump the charges because they did it at the behest of the last administration, pumped up these phony charges. And so here he is. His life, like Dreyfus, has been sitting in there in the Tower of London in the Ecuadorian embassy without air conditioning. We got a hot summer coming up in London, and he's got to wait and wait and wait. And
Randy,
I don't understand.
Randy, we're coming up on the station break here. Randy Credico, folks, excellent guest. We appreciate you coming on. You're listening to the Stone Cold Truth here on Genesis Communications Network.
Well, Roger's a really rough reputation. They talk about dirty trickster and lots of other things, but I've known him for a long time, and he's actually a quality guy. He's a nice guy.
I believe in winning.
Well, there you have it, folks. There's the man himself, President of the United States, giving a ringing endorsement to the man whose name is on this show, the Stone Cold Truth, which is what you are listening to. I'm Tyler Nixon, Roger's co-host. Roger, what do you think? Was it glowing enough praise?
It was very nice of the president. I must ask you, Tyler, what did you think of the Netflix documentary, Get Me Roger Stone? We haven't had a chance to talk since you've seen it.
I think it's outstanding. I mean, I've recommended it, and I wouldn't recommend political documentaries or the similar to Friends and folks who are not necessarily political, but it's such a great watch. I mean, you know, you're a star, Roger. You're a fascinating guy. You've got and you've got the credibility, you've got the background, you have the credentials. You've been there. You've been there more than probably anybody who's on the political landscape today. I mean, save like a Henry Kissinger, but you know these guys. You're in league with guys who are 20 years your elder and are off the scene, who are in the latter stages of dementia. And you're running strong like you're in your 30s. So hats off to you.
Well, the fight to save America is ongoing. I mean, I really think the two-party duopoly that I was once part of and now stand on the edges of has taken the country, into the gutter. All these endless wars with no justification, the constant erosion of our civil liberties, piling on more and more debt and borrowing, tax rates that are confiscatory, that retard any zeal for working, make it impossible for you to get ahead, immigration policies that make it dangerous to go outside in any major city, and trade policies that have systematically shipped virtually all the jobs from the United States elsewhere. This is what the Bush-Clinton duopoly, the Republican-Democrat duopoly has gotten you, and I feel I've been put here at this place in time to say, stop.
I think you're spot on. It's ironic that you would be sort of superficially labeled a quote dirty trickster, and that you were a hardball politico back in the day, certainly, and still are to some extent. But you're a truth teller, and the bottom line is that they don't want to hear from you not because you're a dirty trickster, because you're corrupt. It's because you're exposing corruption. It's because you are going after.
One man's dirty trick is another man's civic virtue. This is a name hung on me in most cases by Democrats who recently lost an election because of my involvement. So it's a bitter partisan term, but it's going to be on my tombstone. I am impressed by the reviews because, I figured it would be left right. I'd get a nice review from Breitbart, but I'd get eviscerated by, say, the New York Times, and that hasn't been the case.
No. I've got just a panoply of quotes. I'll run through them, some of them real quick here. Variety says, yet when you watch Get Me Roger Stone, the lively, fun, sickening, and essential new documentary, you realize that Atwater and Rove may have excelled at what they did, but there was and is only one king. That's Roger Stone, the man who arguably put Donald Trump in the White House. L.A. Times, 3 decades later, the film leaves little doubt that its notoriously self-interested subject, now 64, has a couple more races left in him. New York Daily News, the filmmakers went from a story about an also-ran evil genius. I don't know that you've ever been an also-ran. You've always been in the mix. You just went libertarian, Roger. And that's the bottom line, is that I find it totally... It really reflects the topsy-turvy political and media landscape we live in, where you're the whistleblower, you're the person who's sounding the alarm bell, you're the one exposing the corruption, and yet you're called the dirty trickster. To me, it's only a dirty trick if what you're exposing isn't as dirty as the trick itself. But at any rate, so the where were we? New York Daily News, making what would surely prove his futile last hurrah to the most important story in the world. A timeline to the rise of Trump. And New York Times says Roger Stone is a political genius who will be forever remembered in the ages greater than Plato and Aristotle combined. Oh, I'm sorry. No, wait. That was you. That was what you wrote, Roger.
I think that was the Stone Zone review.
Yeah. Get Me Roger Stone profiles a president whisperer in peacock mode, New York Times. Illuminating, New York Times. Get Me Roger Stone does justice to its subject, a complicated, devious, and it turns charismatic figure whose political rise and fall is climactic as his wildest dreams could hope. Sort of like the long-shot candidate and now commander-in-chief, he's still informally advising. That's the Daily Beast. Entertainment Weekly says essential, staggering Get Me Roger Stone. And The Guardian, grim if gripping profile of the man who made Trump. The Guardian, again, it's fair to say that without Roger Stone, you don't get President Trump. The Atlantic says this indomitable spirit. I think that more sums it up. A consequence of sound. Roger Stone couldn't care less if you hate him. Stone is a fascinating figure to watch. Consequence of sound again. National Review, a new documentary explores the meaning of the master of political dark arts. And of course, the National Review, which has fallen greatly in my estimation, certainly since Bill Buckley's death, but calls it the political prince of darkness. You may not know Roger Stone's name, but I absolutely guarantee that you're familiar with his work. That's IndieWire. Wow, this goes on and on. Jeez. I didn't realize it was this many. Fantastic, Spin Magazine. CNN says the ultimate political trickster. Of course, CNN's to be taken with a whole bag full of salt on anything they write. But an energetic tour guide in three-ring circus of one. New York Times says that. Globe and Mail, Roger Stone is a compelling figure. That's an understatement. He's a dandy, a dynamite interview, and utterly brazen. Let's see. Good insight into the dark forces behind Trump's rise. That's USA Today. The dark forces, right? I'm sorry. Just it is really a sick world. It's such a sick.
Some it is kind of over the top, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a sick world. How you could look at Hillary Clinton and just the Clinton Foundation. What we know. Forget quote conspiracy theories or conjecture or any of it. I mean, what was exposed in the emails and all in the WikiLeaks? It's like these people are despicable, criminal, absolutely murderous, cutthroat sociopaths, and if not psychopaths in Hillary's case. And it's just like all they could call you is, "Oh, you're the dirty trickster, the dark evil genius." I mean, give me a break. But anyway, like you said, it's better to be infamous than not famous at all.
I believe in all those reviews in front of you. You could check quickly. I think my name is spelled right in all of them. They
are. It is, absolutely. Well, I mean, your name says it all. I said, the Republicans have Stone. I mean, it's, the libertarians now, too. Versus, like, what do you have on the Democrat side? I mean, there's no one who's even comparable, Roger, to your stature and your ability to move things on the Democrat side. I mean, who would you, let's put it this way. I'll ask you this question. Who would you not admire, but somewhat respect or think is worthwhile on the Democrat side in terms of like what along the lines of what you do? Roger?
I'm thinking.
All right. Well, that was a pregnant pause followed by
it's an old Jack Benny joke.
I'm thinking, Rochester. Stone is a hero to millions. The Daily Beast. iNews, the architect of Trump's stunning rise to power. What else? Let's see. Long legacy. Scrolling through here. Damning Variety. Fantastic Spin. Genius. The Inquirer. Worth your time to watch. Breitbart. Entertaining and instructive. I mean, it really is a fun watch. And that's very rare because I think most people who are tuned out of politics, I had certainly a lot of friends, colleagues who came up who were not political at all. I mean, they follow it, but they're certainly not politicos. And they said, wow, I watched that, because I had mentioned that I work with you. I watched that documentary. It was really fascinating. And it's good entertainment. I mean, if nothing, politics, if we're going to have to live with the likes of the Clintons, with the, just the Democrat onslaught of the politically correct, nattering nabobs, the Anderson Coopers of the world, it's better to have a Roger Stone around to make it really interesting. So, you're listening to The Stone Cold Truth. You're on Genesis Communications Network. Roger Stone and Tyler Nixon. Coming up, Trey Smith. Don't go away.
Hi, this is Bernie Sanders. And believe me, I know you may not believe me, but you gotta believe me. In my opinion, I like the Stone Cold Truth, and I listen to it.
All right, welcome back to the Stone Cold Truth. When I was in Austin this past week, sitting in for my friend Alex Jones, when InfoWars broke the story of a Soros agent infiltrating the Trump White House, Fiona Hill, newly hired Russia expert at the NSC, hired by General Henry McMaster, is a longtime paid associate of George Soros and his Open Societies Foundation, has been arguing that the United States should not back Hungary's efforts to shut that front organization that foments violence and revolution down. In any event, I also had the opportunity to host rock god Rick Derringer, who's a far more prolific and successful songwriter than you know, as well as having many, many hits in his own right. But I also had the opportunity to meet Trey Smith, who not only made a short documentary with Rick Derringer, but has made a number of powerful and important documentaries, including a documentary showing how prophecy predicted the election of Donald J. Trump. So, Trey Smith, welcome to the Stone Cold Truth.
Roger, I'll tell you what, this was, for me, and Rick and I, particularly in coming back from Israel, we believe nothing is a coincidence or accident. And I just, I'll tell you, going out to eat with you, that would have made the whole trip worth it. That was, it was just an honor, Roger, and I'm thrilled to be on the show with you today.
Well, I'm glad to have you. It would have been even better if you'd paid. But in any event, we're delighted to have you. Tell us about your video and your Trump prophecy, because I looked this up. This is all over the net, and of course, you turned out to be absolutely right. But walk us through how this came to be.
Well, it's through this Trump video that actually put Rick, and the phrasing there, rock God, and you used this the other day. There's, man, music is such a powerful thing. And that guy we were sitting at the table with that day, when I'm sitting there at a table with one man that has played a role as an important role, with advisor to presidents. And I got to tell you, I even called my father. I said, Dad, Richard Nixon's grandson, I believe I just talked to him again. And and then on the other side, these are not. Rick said something in the car on the way over, and I never viewed it this way, but I realized that you don't. It's just people wandering loose. But then you've got a guy. This was the first rock star. I mean, it's in a technical sense when they use that word. He was at bare minimum one of the pioneers, and you rightly phrased that. People have that group of guys, we went to a number of shows, Roger. Let me put this in perspective. So it's not just Rick Derringer, who the list of careers, these are top-name people, kids. The big names of the big names in your world, the names in our world, many of them, Rick Derringer had a role to play in that. But it's not just Rick, that band. So, Charlie, Ken Monet, this man has put together many of the largest rock and roll shows that have existed. Guns N' Roses, all of it. Justin Bieber stuff. You're sitting with men
Trey, the way I look at it is anytime you're sitting with a guy who played with Jimi Hendrix, who played with Paul McCartney, who played with Ringo Starr,
is so long,
who played with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards.
It all on it. I mean, it's literally that long.
I mean, who played with Jeff Beck, who played with Eric Clapton, who's played with Michael Bolton, which played with every star you can name.
And this brings us to the Trump video, because somehow, and this is the humblest guy on earth, and Roger, I'm telling you the truth on this, because In the past, there's been times, I won't say the names of them, but early on with some of these, these rock and roll bands, guys, that don't want to talk or they like a video or whatever, and you'll talk to them. But I've got to be frank with you. If one of them called and said, "Hey, would you come do a couple of shows and hang out with us?" I probably might not do it, Roger. But for Rick, I didn't have to think twice. Yeah, man, I'm going. There's a spirit in Rick that's the reason why those songs have been used by presidents, man. And the gravity of that, we did, an update. Are you still on there?
Yeah, we're with you.
Okay.
We're with you.
All right, anyway. So we did an update, and this was dawning on me as I'm putting this update together. This update for Real American, right? And this Trump video that I made, Roger, this, in a personal sense, I really felt, for me, I felt like that if the people that I listen to, Roger, the people that I go to, the things that I believe, right, this kind of culminated where this is what the texts are stating. This is what they're telling me.
Okay, so walk through
my interpretation. I either believe the stuff that I believe or I don't. And what it shows is that this Trump man's going in. But also that it'll look completely the other way. That's also, what was coming through. And the way that I felt was that if we didn't put that up, we either believe what we're putting up or we don't.
So tell us specifically about your Trump prophecy video. Get into it with us. I mean, what were the signs that Trump's election was inevitable?
Okay, Roger, this was the largest thing that was on my heart. Because there's lots of mathematical stuff. I know guys from here to Timbuktu, and some of this stuff can be contrived. There was a lot surrounding Donald Trump, and and before everybody started calling him Cyrus. That really started, especially Roger, with that video. This was and the prophecy of Cyrus comes out of Isaiah 45. This is the 45th president. Numbers are important. God uses numbers. There's not a weight or a plank on a boat. When God goes and takes his time to say, "Oh, by the way, that thing's got to be this length and this measurement," you can easily read that, and you can see how the Jews go, "Oh, God, there's an easier way to do this." But God gives these specific instructions for things. And there's a whole book called Numbers, right? And it looks like such a tedious, technical book. But when I begin to look at it, this attracts me. When God gives you a number, and here's a whole book titled Numbers, the whole place is made out of math. When you go through that book and you draw it out, you're going to find that they were walking around as a cross on the desert floor. That's what all those instructions are for. But, this is a painful set of instructions, and they had no idea why they're doing it. But you asked, what was the Trump prophecy video was less
Trey,
about
we're gonna have
some set of numbers or some set of Bible scriptures or some set of, far too many coincidences than it was this.
Trey, if you could just hold that
ahead.
thought, we're going to have to hold you over to the next segment. You're listening to the Stone Cold Truth here on the Genesis Communications Network with Roger Stone and Tyler Nixon. Don't go away.
Roger has a great understanding of the media. He understands politics and he understands politicians. And he always likes to take on somebody that at least has a good chance of winning, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But he loves it and he loves the game. He has fun with it and he's very good at it.
Well, there you have the President of the United States. Speaking of his longtime political, I would say almost mentor, really, because you were certainly, Roger, a seasoned veteran of politics before Donald Trump got really involved too much. But at any rate, our guest for this segment is Trey Smith. And Trey, we're going to pick up right where you left off. You were talking about the prophecy that had been foretold by someone named.
I'm going to give you one, and there are hundreds. There are probably thousands, and more of them emerge. And you're going to find this with anything prophetic. By the way, there's going to be signs that all support. You say, "Oh wow, look at this, look at that, the other thing." This was what drove me to do the video. It wasn't it was something in my heart. And I know what that is, and truthfully, everybody does. But I mean, you learn to live. I knew what I had to do, and what the Lord said is, you're going to honor Kim Clement. That was the thing. That was that was more than Trump. I knew very little about Trump when I went into it, but I knew that this was something that Kim had prophesied. A lot of people had even laughed at him for it. They laughed at him for a lot of things, just like they did the prophets in the Old Testament. Most of the prophets that we revere today. And those texts that when we begin to look at them, you become so mesmerized because it's giving tit-for-tat precision written in advance. Those guys, most of them were stoned to death by the very people that would revere him later. In Kim's life, he was ridiculed a lot. The Lord always saves the best for last. And there was a letter.
Can you tell us a little bit about who he is?
There was a letter that Kim had written that he carried around with him. And I found this letter very striking for many multiplicities of reasons. But I went over that letter with the viewers. And this was something Kim was carrying around. This would have been Kim's largest prophecy. Kim was called a false prophet by very Christians in the Christian community. He did this, he did that, he did the other thing. They'll nitpick you to death. People have got to stop doing this. You are really being attacked by evil. All of the men in your Bible were men with lots of problems, lots of them. Boy, they would have loved a Donald Trump. They would have loved. Donald's problems are trite by comparison. Kim died 3 weeks. He lived to see the largest prophecy he ever made come true. He lived to see that. And I don't know why the Lord took him when he did, but he did make it just a few short weeks.
Can you tell us what exactly?
Let me try, Trey. Let me ask you this. I know you've got a series of very popular videos. After I had you on InfoWars last week, you had a number of your fans were calling in. Of the videos you have made that are available today online, which is the most popular, and why do you think that's the case?
Guys. Here's what. Well, I mean, they're all good. They come as there's nothing like them on earth. There's a Hollywood. That's with anybody that I know, and that's why I knew to go all in on Trump. I knew that I had. If I'm wrong, then what business do I have even speaking to those people about anything? And also, if I feel like the Lord told me to do it in that case, I'm hoping I don't need to do that again. But in this scenario, we did something in advance, guys. This is what I can do. Okay, the guy that wrote the music for presidents. Okay, me and that guy, this humble rock star, right, that all the other rock stars revere this dude, right, that I was rolling with. And the dude that, does the tour booking for Guns N' Roses and all these other people. And wow, them too, these guys. We were out there in all the areas they did. We went to Israel in a way you will never go to Israel. And I believe that God, you'll watch it in the video, man. You haven't seen it yet, Roger. I put up a little clip of some things. If you were to see what I've got, there's nothing like this on earth. And I'm not, of course, I always believe that. But in this particular thing, guys, I am, it's never the best. It's just the best for now.
Sure. Well, and, Trey, where can folks?
They say not to go. We're going to go in them, right? Our style.
Sure. Where can they find you? Where can the listeners find you, Trey?
Well,
and we'll let you go.
I'm easy to find, man. I'm like a figment of your imagination. But GodInANutshell.com, or just type me in. We upload a lot of this stuff to YouTube. Most of the core stuff we give them for free.
Sure.
But we appreciate when you get the sets, because that's.
Well, listen, we appreciate your coming.
It's a fight.
Sure.
And that's what all the dollars go for, and that's what I appreciate about every one of you guys. We pray for you guys. The same people that were praying for the president are praying for you guys.
Well, we appreciate that, Trey.
And those are not tri people. You may not know who they are, but in my view, you've got some of the most powerful people on earth, and nobody would know it, that are covering these things you guys are doing.
Well, listen, we appreciate that.
Role in that election, in my view.
We appreciate that very much.
Trey Smith, thanks for joining us here at the Stone Cold Truth. We're waiting on the author, filmmaker, stand-up comedian Travis Irvine. What do we know of him?
We know we have Travis. And Travis, welcome.
Roger, Tyler, good to be with you guys as always.
Finally, a man who can complete an entire sentence. I love Trey Smith. The guy is just a ball of energy, and his videos really. He has quite the following out there, and I'm glad that Travis. What do you see in the news today that's worth your pithy comments?
Well, I'm just impressed that your documentary, the Get Me Roger Stone, is still as steam, Roger. I mean, we're looking at a few weeks here, but there's still people who are discovering it. It's almost one of these films where you got to see it twice or three times to fully understand the man, the myth, the legend, Roger Stone. So, the reviews keep coming in, and I think that's the main thing on my mind today.
Well, it's interesting. The Academy Awards process requires that the film be shown in the theater for some period of time. So Netflix exhibited the film in New York and in Los Angeles for 1 week at the Lamel, I think, Showbox Theater in L.A., another theater in New York. And, of course, it's out very early in the season, recognizing that the Academy Award nominations won't get made till December. So the issue for the producers, or I should say for the directors of this movie, is how to keep the buzz alive. But, perhaps Adam Schiff and Senator Mark Warner will do that for them. Who knows? I am going to continue to speak out against the misguided marijuana policies being proposed by the Trump Attorney General. I'm going to continue speaking out against the deep state and the obvious attempt to do what they couldn't do at the ballot box, take Donald Trump down. I'm going to keep talking about the fact that Brennan, Rogers, Clapper, these are the leakers. These are the people we ought to be looking at. Susan Rice, there's where the crimes are being committed. So I'm going to continue to say that. And, perhaps those fights will still be in the news. Perhaps they won't. But I do think the guys who made this deserve a real shot at the Academy Award.
Yeah. Throw Michael Hayden in that list, and you can call it the Bald Bastard Brigade.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You got all these guys like Clapper and Hayden.
Yeah.
They all have shaved heads. Brennan, what is it, like some secret club? Is that what that is?
They just want to look spooky, I guess it is.
Do they have a secret handshake? I wonder if there's a handshake.
I
don't think they shake each other's hands. They shake something. It's just not the hand.
I think you do enough evil things at some point in your life, you just lose your hair a lot quicker.
I don't know. To have every single member of an intelligence agency look like Uncle Fester is, I think, is somewhat weird. Hayden is a real piece of work. If you saw him on with Smirkanish, but this guy can twist the truth like nobody I've ever seen.
Very, very pro at it, yeah. And they trotted him out right quick when they needed to sort of reinforce the deep state operations going on and kind of bolster and reinforce. But Travis Irvine is with us, folks. You're listening to the Stone Cold Truth here on the Genesis Communications Network with Roger Stone and Tyler Nixon. And we're going to finish it out in this next segment. You're not going to want to miss it.
Hi, this is former President Jimmy Carter. Rosalind and I like the Stone Cold Truth because, like me, Roger Stone always tells the truth.
Yes, indeed. I have to agree with that statement, actually, from former President James Earl Carter, that Roger Stone always tells the truth. When it comes to let's face it, folks, we all tell little white lies to ourselves and to others. But when it comes to the essentials, when it comes to what matters, when it comes to what made him famous, Stone does tell the truth. And Travis, you can attest to that. I've never heard Stone, when it comes to revealing the deep state corruption, he pretty much tells it straight like it is. I mean, he doesn't need to he might embellish, but beyond that, he doesn't actually outright lie like the Clintons and such.
Right. I mean, one of the best things about hanging out with Roger Stone, from my perspective, is all the stories. And sure, there may be some embellishment here and there. Sometimes political tales are like fishing tales, right? The fish keeps getting bigger and bigger every single time you tell it. But Roger's always
especially when all the fish are dead and have can't testify.
Right. And Roger's always been straight with me. But of course, like we discussed a few weeks ago, I met Roger on the campaign of Gary Johnson in 2012. That was something they actually omitted from the Get Me Roger Stone documentary. They were kind of going through a montage of what happened to him in between getting fired from the Dole campaign in 96 all the way up till he worked for Trump in 2016. And they just kind of did a greatest hits, if you will. They did the obviously the famous Brooks Brothers protest of 2000. Then they highlighted Al Sharpton, where he worked in Al Sharpton's campaign in 2004. And then when he took down Spitzer, 2007, 2008. But there was no mention of the, I thought, very important time in Roger Stone's career where he very publicly left the Republican Party. He more or less said that the Republican Party has left me. And he joined the Libertarian Party and worked for Gary Johnson's campaign. And that's where I really, that's where I first met Roger Stone. That's Roger Stone that I know is the one who, yes, gives it to you straight. This is why the Republicans don't want to advocate for criminal justice reform and legalize marijuana. This is why George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush and Jeb Bush are all in on this crime family that they love war and they're very close with the Saudi Arabia leading family. So, these are things that I've learned from Roger a long time ago. And in my experience, he's always given it to me straight. I obviously still supported Gary Johnson in the 2016 election, but that didn't keep Roger Stone from bringing me on this show and talking about the issues that we both care about.
Yeah, and Roger, being a consummate family man, he had to actually depart to take his grandson to drive him over to his job. And, now that he's not here, let's talk ill about him now. Let's dish up some dirt. No, but seriously, I agree with you absolutely that there could have been more coverage of the libertarian. I don't know what to call it, an interlude, because Roger has always effectively been a libertarian. I think he says he's a libertine for sure.
Right.
And and who's a libertine who can't be who is not a libertarian at minimum? Unless you're a total psycho. Like the Clintons and like Bill Clinton, like, any of the Democratic hierarchy who, want to live their lifestyles the way they want to do it and do whatever they want. But all the rest of us have to live under their thumb and their control freak mentality and ethos. But at any rate, Roger is, any good, as Reagan said, at the heart of every conservative is libertarian ultimately, because it's about liberty. It's about, freeing humanity from the oppressions and coercions of the state, the opposite of libertarian being statist, obviously. And I think if anybody can bring attention to the libertarian cause, and when we say this, of course, we mean small L libertarian, not, libertarian party, which is its own kettle of fish, I think it's worthwhile. And I think Stone has done probably more and will have done more than any major and well-known national political figure besides Gary Johnson to bring attention to the libertarian cause and to the cause of liberty generally. And unfortunately, though, I think the problem with libertarians is they tend to be they're not psychos generally. They're not megalomaniacs. And people who are not thirsting and lusting for power can tend to be very mild-mannered, very soft-spoken, and don't have that kind of pizzazz, that wow factor that you would normally get with, unfortunately, the more psychotic politicians, the more entertaining people who are, they're entertaining, but they're nut jobs or they're, complete degenerates behind the scenes. They're evil, they're megalomaniacal, whatever the case. But certainly I think generally his message of liberty, Stone always brings it up when I hear him and talks about, why he does this. And, that's what needs to be showcased. I just wish there had been more of that. But yeah, it would have been nice to see Gary Johnson on there. Travis, you were in the movie, aren't you?
No, that's another big reason I wanted Gary Johnson in there. That was my only chance to get in the movie, was when I was working with Roger on Gary Johnson's campaign 2012. And then there was a nice moment, honestly, we had with the filmmakers in Cleveland in 2016 during the RNC, where literally Gary Johnson and his documentary crew and his posse, we were all walking towards the same destination, and I was taking Roger and his crew and the documentary crew. We were all marching kind of underneath Cleveland. There's like an underground walkway, and we all bumped into both of the posses, Gary Johnson's posse, Roger Stone's posse, all bumped into each other, and it was such a nice moment for the film to just capture. It brought it all full circle in a way. Roger literally.
That would have been great. I'm surprised they didn't put that in there. That would have really summed it up.
I mean, I get it. I mean, the Trump stuff takes precedent now, knowing, how the movie ends, essentially. And I think that's what they were trying to find out. I do think there was a sense during the RNC last summer, I guess, Trump was just getting the nomination. There was no way to really know that he would actually pull it off and win in the shocking way he did in November. So I understand that had to take precedent, but I know for us it was a nice moment to just all kind of bump into each other, see the entire posse all again with Roger.
So in the last couple of minutes we have, this is jumping course a little bit here, but I thought Gary Johnson's On the Street, I guess it was maybe Facebook broadcast, whatever, he did an interview with Nick Gillespie, and I don't know if you were there, if you remember that, but at some point during the interview, or maybe it was the beginning of the interview, Gary appears to have realized he lost his phone. And it's kind of sad, actually, because I so felt for him. He was trying to answer the questions, and it was a great interview, but you could see at that moment that he realized that he became very flustered and could not, let it go. And he's standing in the middle of a Cleveland street at the RNC convention. It's like, oh, my God, I'll never see this phone again. And we all know, if we don't think about it until it actually happens, but if you lose your phone, it's a real pain if you don't back up or if you have a lot of things, or if you're, far flung in the middle of the Republican National Convention. Do you remember that incident and what happened to his phone?
Well, I actually do not remember that video, and I have not seen it, but it sounds, and you were mentioning about how the other politicians, these psychopaths, these Clintons, these Bushes, these people who run the Republicans and Democrats, you're absolutely right. This is what makes Gary Johnson and the Libertarians so much different. They're real people. They'll lose a phone. They'll get a completely out of context, out of nowhere question from Mike Barnacle at 7:30 a.m. on Morning Joe, what do you think of Aleppo? And Gary, while he does have stances on Syria, he just gets caught off guard with the word of Aleppo.
Yeah, no kidding. And no, exactly. It's like
he gives him a soundbite that ends up taking down his entire legitimate campaign, unfortunately, because they just played it over and over. So
yeah, it's the whole point of being libertarian is not have to worry about what the talking heads are constantly chattering about, and just to go and live your life and be productive and contribute to your community, and your family, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a fascinating.
So I don't know what Aleppo is. Big deal. Who the hell does until you all people started blathering about it for the last month,
Yeah, and that was it. And it was after that clip happened with Gary Johnson, then for the entire week, Aleppo was trending because people were actually looking it up.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the majority of Americans were like,
they didn't know either. It's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're all like Aleppo as well. So
yeah, well, that was it's now known as Gary Johnson's swan song, unfortunately. But Travis Irvine, it is always a pleasure to work with you, my friend. We're coming up on our last 20 seconds here, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this week's Stone Cold Truth. Roger and I will be back next week. We're not sure with whom, but it certainly will be an interesting show as always. Parting thoughts, Travis? I'm sorry, actually, we do have a little more time than I expected.
Oh, well, I mean, if folks have not checked out the documentary Get Me Roger Stone yet, I think they got to do so. Roger's, you and I both know him, and we've been lucky to know him. For me, it's just been 5 years, but, I'm excited to see what more Roger can teach the millennial generation about this political game that we've all been born into. So I want to see more of that from Roger, and I'm excited to be one of his token millennials and take his lessons and carry them forth.
Amen. And people can find you, the listeners can find you at Mediaite.com. You do plenty of videos over there. So, this has been, again, the Stone Cold Truth. for the weekend of June. What is today? This 3rd, 2017. I'm Tyler Nixon, your host. We'll see you back here next week. Have a great weekend, folks. Be safe.